What if I told you that McLaren didn't fail, but rather is losing control of its own car just when it should be dominating Formula One? Because what happened with Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri in China was not a simple abandonment, it was something much more serious, two different failures at the same critical point, and the worst of all, is that the team doesn't even know why it happened. How is it possible that the champion car, the most technically aggressive on the grid, suddenly can't even start a race, and ends up leaving its two drivers completely out before the start? Stay until the end, because what's behind this disaster not only explains the fury of Norris and Piastri, but could completely change the course of the championship. What happened in China cannot be understood if we do not look at the complete context in which McLaren arrives at this Grand Prix, because we are talking about a team that had come to dominate the narrative of Formula One, to be champion, to have the most worked and aggressive car on the grid, and suddenly everything breaks at the worst possible moment. McLaren did not arrive weak, on the contrary, it arrived as a reference, with a car that had been evolved in practically all its areas, pushing the technical limits to the maximum to maintain its advantage, with two drivers in brutal shape and with the real expectation of consolidating itself as the team to beat at the beginning of 2025, especially after what was seen in Australia where the pace was evident and confidence was at its highest point. But China changes absolutely everything because the sprint format already introduces extreme pressure, a single practice, little margin for error, cars still in the understanding phase. And this is where the first signs begin to appear that something was not working as it should within the MCL 39, although at that time no one imagined the real scope of the problem. Even so, performance on the track was not the main concern because both Norris and Piastri continued to show speed, they continued to be in the fight, they continued to show that the car had the potential to fight at the top, which makes everything that happens next even more incomprehensible from within the team. And then the key moment arrives, the hours before the race, when everything should be under control, and that's where McLaren begins to fall apart from within. First, Norris's car presents a critical failure, an electronic problem in the power unit that appears too late to react with margin, forcing the team to dismantle fundamental parts of the car in a desperate attempt to find a solution that never arrives, which makes it clear from that moment that they are not dealing with a superficial error, but with something much more complex that requires an in-depth investigation. But what really turns this into an internal scandal is not just that failure, it's what happens next. Because while the team is still trying to understand what happened to Norris, Piastri's car, which was apparently ready, which was going to compete, which was going to be on the grid, suffers another completely different failure, also electrical, also on the power unit side, but without direct relation to his teammate's problem, which confirms the worst possible scenario for McLaren. It is not a specific error, it is a system that is failing in multiple critical points at the same time. And in that moment, everything changes. Because it is no longer a question of bad luck, nor of timing, nor of an isolated defective component. It is a clear sign that the car has a structural weakness that the team does not fully understand, and that is what begins to generate real tension within the garage. The two cars were out before starting, the two drivers unable to compete, the team without clear answers. And most importantly, without an immediate solution. This is where the conflict arises because both Norris and Piastri not only lose points, they lose confidence, they lose the certainty that the car they have is reliable, and in Formula One that changes absolutely everything. This is the turning point of the story because what seemed like a simple technical problem becomes an internal crisis that begins to directly affect the relationship between drivers and team, and that leaves a question floating in the air that changes everything. What if McLaren doesn't really understand its own car? The real problem did not explode at the moment of the failure, it exploded later when Norris and Piastri began to understand what had really happened, and above all what McLaren could not explain. Because there is something that completely changes the perspective of both drivers, and it is the fact that there was no clear cause, there was no immediate explanation, there was no solid response from the team, and in Formula One, when a driver feels that his own team does not understand the problem, trust begins to break from within. Lando Norris lets it be seen with a clarity that is not usual for him because he is not just talking about frustration for not racing, he is talking about something deeper, a failure that the team knew they could not fix, a problem that required investigation. That is, a situation in which there was not even a provisional solution to compete, and that is what really ignites his anger, because it means that the car is fundamentally unreliable. And in the case of Piastri, the situation is even more delicate, because his anger comes from the accumulation, from the feeling of losing opportunities without being able to do absolutely anything, 2 weekends in a row without competing in real conditions, seeing how the championship progresses and he is simply left out due to factors that he does not control, which generates brutal internal pressure. A feeling of helplessness that begins to transform into direct tension with the team. This is where the narrative completely changes because we're no longer talking about a technical problem. We're talking about an emotional rift within McLaren. The two drivers begin to question things that were not in doubt before. They begin to wonder to what extent they can trust the car, to what extent the team has control of what is happening, and above all, if these types of failures can be repeated at any time. And this is further aggravated when it is confirmed that it was not a single failure, but rather two distinct electrical problems within the same critical system, which eliminates any argument of chance or coincidence, and turns the incident into a clear sign that there is something wrong with the car's architecture, something that is not well integrated, something that is not fully understood. But the most worrying thing comes when the medium-term impact is understood. Because McLaren not only loses this race, it loses development time. The team is forced to stop its evolution plan to focus on investigating these failures, which means that while its rivals advance, they are stuck trying to understand what has gone wrong, and in such a tight season, that can make the difference between fighting for the title or starting to lose ground little by little without realizing it. And this is where Norris and Piastri really explode from the inside. Because they know the car is fast, they know they have the potential to win, but they also know that that potential is of no use if they can't trust themselves to finish a race, if they have no guarantees that the car will perform when it matters most. This is the point where frustration turns into something more dangerous: distrust. Distrust in the car, distrust in the team's decisions, and most importantly, distrust in the immediate future. Because now the question is no longer if McLaren is fast. The question is whether McLaren is reliable. And when that doubt enters a pilot's head, everything changes. And this is where everything reaches its most critical point. Because what happened in China does not end when the cars turn off. In fact, this is exactly where the real problem begins for McLaren. Because after the initial shock, after the frustration, after the disbelief, comes the most dangerous consequence of all: the change of mentality. Norris and Piastri no longer see the car in the same way. Before China, the MCL39 was a tool to win, an aggressive car, yes, but reliable within that calculated risk, a car that allowed them to attack, take risks, push to the limit knowing that behind it there was a solid base. But now that perception is completely broken. Because when a driver enters the car without the certainty that he is going to finish the race, everything changes, the way of driving changes, the way of managing risk changes, even the relationship with the team changes. And this has a direct effect on the track. Because it's no longer just about being fast, it's about how much you're willing to risk with a car that can fail at any moment. And that's where McLaren begins to lose its biggest advantage: the total confidence of its drivers. But there is something even deeper that aggravates this situation. And these types of failures not only affect the present, they condition the immediate future. The team is now forced to make decisions that were not in the initial plan, to rethink development, to prioritize reliability over performance, which means that that aggressive car they had built, that car that sought to squeeze out every thousandth, now needs to be contained, reviewed, limited in certain aspects to prevent the problem from recurring. And that, in a season where every detail counts, is a direct blow to their aspirations. While other teams continue to evolve, adding performance, optimizing their packages, McLaren is in a correction phase, in a phase of doubt, in a phase where they cannot move forward until they fully understand what is failing. And this generates brutal pressure within the team. Because Norris and Piastri aren't just angry about what happened. They're worried about what could happen again. They are in a situation where they know they have the car to win, but they don't know if that car is going to allow them to compete when it really matters. And that is the worst possible feeling for a pilot. Because it no longer depends on your talent, your pace, or your ability to manage a race. It depends on something outside of their control. Something that even the team hasn't been able to fully figure out. And this is where the story takes its final turn. Because McLaren is still fast, it still has one of the best cars on the grid, but now it is saddled with a doubt that could change everything. A doubt that is not measured in lap times, nor in tire degradation, nor in strategies. It is measured in trust. And in Formula One, when you lose confidence, you can lose everything. A clear warning that even the strongest team can falter when they lose control of the most important thing: their own car. Because McLaren did not lose due to lack of rhythm, they did not lose due to strategy, they did not lose due to errors on the track. They lost due to something much more worrying, due to a problem that not even they themselves fully understand, and that is what has unleashed the fury of Norris and Piastri, not the result, but the uncertainty. Right now, the MCL39 is still fast, it's still competitive, it's still a candidate for the title, but it's no longer a guarantee. And in such a tight championship, where every point counts, where every race defines the course, that doubt can be more dangerous than any rival. Because while Norris and Piastri look forward knowing that they have the talent to win, they also do so with a question that should not be on their minds. Is the car going to respond when it really matters? And if McLaren doesn't respond quickly, if it doesn't find answers, if it doesn't regain that lost trust, what started as a technical problem in China could end up becoming the turning point that causes them to lose the championship. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.